All right, Derrik, let's dig into the games of the week presented by BetMGM. We got 3 today, which is a lot, and we're going to try to get through these at a reasonable pace so this isn't a 4-hour-long podcast. First game we wanted to chat about here, Vikings and Packers. The Packers are -2.5. This game, there was a world where this was going to be a really important game. The Vikings were slightly better than we thought. If the Packers were the contender that everyone expected coming into the year, I think this is probably, if Jordan Love plays, this is probably the most interesting, important, impactful iteration we possibly could have gotten for this game 4 weeks into the season.
Yeah, you're right. I think in most worlds, this was probably going to be an important game, but the way in which we've got there doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like we've gotten the full Sam Darnold experience in a good way. The defense is like way better than we thought it could be for the Vikings. And then the Packers, they lose their $1 trillion quarterback in week 1, and they lose in week 1 on a national televised stage. And then they somehow win 2 games in a row with Malik Willis to save their season. And now they're the ones that it feels like they're in the weird spot going into this game. Like we probably thought maybe the Packers could be 3-0 and the Vikings would be like the weird scrappy team. Seems like we're now in the opposite, where somehow the Vikings are 3-0 and the Packers are like the weird scrappy team trying to figure themselves out. So a weird way to arrive here, but it's been cool.
I hate awards talk a month into the season, but I will say right now that I think we can comfortably put Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur into the pole positions at 1 and 2 in some order for Coach of the Year. And why I think it's probably worth starting to beat that drum on September 26th when we're recording this is each of them should probably have one. Like I know it's whenever you do that, you have to go back and be like, all right, which year would they have gotten one? You probably could have given it to Kevin O'Connell in 2022. You probably could have given it to Matt LaFleur last year. Like these guys, I think even as we spend so much time thinking and talking about the Sean McVay coaching world and coaching sphere, I still think both of them are probably underrated. LaFleur, I thought that was a multi-year thing. I think Kevin O'Connell over the first 3 weeks of the season has shown us that he probably belongs in that conversation with all of the buddies who once coached in Los Angeles at one point or another.
I think earlier in this season, I did think that Kevin O'Connell had won it in 2022. I think we were trying to debate who had actually won it, and I had made a reference to like the Kevin's winning Coach of the Year, and I thought he had won it that year because, yeah, he probably deserved it. And then, yeah, LaFleur has been one of the best in the game for a long time, and it just seems, I've said this before, he comes up with some of these, he has these like best one-off games, and to do what he's done with Willis the past 2 weeks, man, he's just incredible.
So let's talk about Willis and let's talk about whether or not he's going to play in this game, because I think that's the most important point of discussion and the most important consideration going into this. Is Jordan Love going to play? And that's important and crucial, I think, on 2 different levels. One, Jordan Love is a very good quarterback. Having Jordan Love back there so you don't have to worry about creating this crazy one-off game plan, even if we liked what we've seen from Malik Willis, that's important. And then the other side of this is what we saw Jordan Love do to Brian Flores and this defensive scheme the last time these 2 teams played. There have been some changes since, but I think Love's play style and just what he gives you as a quarterback, those factors are really important when you think about the best plan forward for how to attack this Vikings defense.
100%, because I think if the Vikings are going to be this defense that is so aggressive, they throw so many different things at the wall, they're attacking you from so many different angles with all their blitzes, you have to be a quarterback, one, who understands where his answers are and has good answers. And I think Matt LaFleur does typically a pretty good job of giving that to him. And I think, especially over the second half of last year, he did a really good job of understanding what those were and just throwing them and being able to make those plays. I think, too, you have to be a quarterback who is willing to create a little bit, willing to make throws even when you're a little bit uncomfortable and unsure of things, and just rip it and trust that your answers are going to be there. We know Jordan Love, almost to a fault maybe sometimes, has that confidence in him and has that aggressiveness. And I think if you can tap into that the right way, that is actually the perfect style of quarterback to beat this defense. And I actually think we even saw that in moments last week with CJ Stroud. It's just some of his best moments got taken off the board. They were behind the scoreboard because the Vikings were scoring. But I think that is the best way to be able to attack this defense.
If you look at what Love did last year, and this makes sense when you're playing against a team that's trying to bail out into those versions of cover 2, just throw it over it. Just have guys run right through and just chuck it over the top of all of that crazy zone shit and don't even worry about it. That, and I also think that some of the things that he's done with buying time. It's funny because this defense specifically is almost engineered to hurt a quarterback like Brock Purdy, who does a very good job of playing on time. Like that's what Brock Purdy does. And I think CJ Stroud at his best is also one of those quarterbacks who's just like robotically making great decisions from the pocket. And what Jordan Love gives you is, all right, if you're going to be in this cover zero look and you're going to eject into something else, that moment where I'm not sure what the coverage is, and that's when the pass rush is getting home, well, that's when Jordan Love does his little, well, I'm just going to retreat 3.5 yards in the pocket and somehow make a sidearm throw completely off schedule. And what you're doing on the back end and that moment of confusion matters just a little bit less.
He can go into Madden mode, and you kind of have to be able to go
So
into
true.
Madden mode against this defense because they're
Just run
they're
back
gonna
20 yards and then throw it as far as you can.
yes, they're going to force you to either quickly throw the pod immediately and pray to God that you're right, or they're going to force you into this mode where it's like, all right, they kind of got me. I got to go make a play. And Jordan Love he kind of wants to play that play anyway. And so if he can get 3-4 of those plays where he feels comfortable, he's able to find a guy down the field. That is probably how the Packers are going to pull this one out.
I will say this is a different sort of unit than the one that he had to play against last year in week 18 or week 17, week 18. I can't remember. It was on New Year's Eve. That's how I know. I was at a Chinese restaurant while this game was happening with my friends because we were not doing a show that night. So it was late in the season, and it was late in the season when the Vikings had been, I don't know, found out is the right way to frame it, but I think that people had a beat on what they were trying to do and some answers to go along with it. That's harder to find when you're playing against this version of the pass rush. Like last year, Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, those sorts of guys, they weren't walking through the door. I know Danielle Hunter was here, but we've discussed this a lot. This personnel that they have in Minnesota now is much better equipped to run this sort of unit. And you're also dealing with some of the layers and the curveballs and some of those quarters pressures and just different sort of nuances and complexities that Flores has been able to throw in the second iteration of this scheme.
Yeah, they have more flexibility than they did at the end of
Yeah.
last year. Whereas the end of last year, they kind of were just it was chaotic, but they just couldn't bend into these different little worlds that they
They're just
wanted
holding
to.
on for dear life. You could just
Yeah.
see them white knuckling it till the end of the season.
Exactly, but now you've got a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel who can you could give him just about any assignment outside of sprinting into a deep half, and I'd be like, yeah, he can probably handle it, and he probably would handle it pretty well. Jonathan Grenard has been a really versatile pass rusher for them. Blake Cashman has given them better coverage, and then you're getting another year of Ivan Pace being able to handle some interesting stuff. So like they just have more stuff that's holding it together than they did last year.
That's such a good one to point out though, because so if you're going to be in dime, which they did a lot and continue to do, where there's putting all these DBs out there, having Blake Cashman as your coverage linebacker in the middle in those looks on third down is just so much better than having a guy like Ivan Pace there. And that's just one little area where, again, this personnel is so much better equipped to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish on that side of the ball. Let's get to the other side of this. I want to talk about when the Vikings have the ball because we haven't really discussed the Packers defense at all. It was a unit that I was relatively bullish on coming into the year compared to other people just because I thought that a change in play style and what their front was doing by the end of last year, I thought that there was a version of this where they could be pretty scary. So far, they've been decent. I think they're like 13th in defensive DVOA. What has your read been on just what this Packers defense is trying to do and how well they're actually doing it right now?
I feel like they've kind of met in the middle in terms of like what the possibilities were for them. Where like, at the very, very best, if everything worked out and they had the turnaround that the Browns did last year, they could be fifth or sixth or something in defense. Or there was the world where all of these super talented pieces still don't matter and Jeff Halfley doesn't bring anything to them and they're a bottom 5, 6 defense again. We've kind of met in the middle, like you said, where they're 13th, 14th in DVOA. And I think you kind of have to break it down by layer of the defense. I think the pass rush has been fine. I think it could have been a lot better, and I think we were expecting it to be better than it could be. The linebacker room has been exactly what we thought it would be, which is bad, but it's been okay because the secondary has been incredible, and I think they've gotten what they've paid for out of a guy like Xavier McKinney. Jair Alexander has played really, really well. So I
Outside of
actually
week one, let's with
right,
that
yeah,
caveat.
yeah,
Jair Alexander has played well in games that were not played on an ice rink. That's all we have
right.
to say.
I'm willing to give like most of the Packers roster a pass for that game. Like that, I feel like a lot of those guys did not play up to their standard in that game. And so yeah, Alexander has been really, really good the past 2 weeks. They've picked off a lot of passes. I think they have like 7 picks or something this year, which is probably not sustainable. But
I was
it's
going to
nice that
say
they.
that feels like a little bit of fool's gold. I actually was a little bit worried about that. The fact that they're picking off that many balls, they're turning teams over that often, and the defense has been a little above average.
Yeah, I It's probably a little bit questionable, but I mean, Jair kind of plays that way anyway, and
Yeah.
Xavier McKinney kind of plays that way anyway. And so I think it'll be fine. They're probably not going to pick off. I mean, at that rate, it would be like 30 something passes by the end of the year, which is probably not going to happen. But I think they've been playing really well in the back end, and then if the pass rush can, I don't know, if they can be like slightly better over the course of the season, then yeah, this unit really kicks up to a different level.
I it really is the defense I thought it would be with a slightly worse pass rush in this sense, is that we were worried about the linebackers, and I think the linebackers continued to be sort of a question mark. We were worried about maybe the other corner outside of Jair Alexander, and Eric Stokes has had his rough moments over the course of the season so far. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's like he's clearly their number 2 corner. And so I was talking to a coach that was game planning for them earlier in the season. He was saying, "Yeah, like the front is good. The other corner spot outside of Alexander is not as good as they probably want it to be, and the linebackers are an issue. Everything else is great." And then I went back and watched them this morning, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is."
Yep.
And so that being the state of affairs would be okay if the pass rush was dominant. And right now, it's been fine. Right? It's been somewhere middle of the pack, and I think they did a lot of eating last week against the Titans front, where the right side is about as bad of a right side of an offensive line as you're going to get in the NFL right now. So against a more complete unit, and this Vikings team right now is absolutely that. I mean, the upgrade in right tackle play from what the Titans were trotting out last week and what Brian O'Neill is going to give you is a different sort of world. So if this front isn't going to take over games and really be dominant, then I think that the best case scenario is for them probably to land somewhere in the middle of the pack, and that's exactly where they are right now.
And I think truthfully, they need a little bit more from their interior, especially in this game, because you're probably just not going to beat these tackles. I mean, Darisaw and O'Neal are one of the best duos in the league right now. And I think that the Vikings interior has been better than I thought it was going to be, especially at the left guard position. It's still a gettable unit, especially I think at the right guard and center position. Like, it is still a very gettable unit. So if the Packers interior players, Devonta Wyatt has had his moments and he's been really impressive in stretches. So like, if he can have a game like that, might be the difference that kind of pushes him over the top in this one.
I'm not writing off the front getting there at some
No,
point this
absolutely not.
season because there's so much talent there. And I think they're trying to figure out the right combinations, right? Like Enigbare has played a lot on the edge, I think, because the length he gives them against the run. Like, I think we're still so early that they're figuring out who their best pieces are and how they want to be deployed. And the other question we had about this defense was just structurally, what was it going to be? Right? We've never seen Jeff Halfley as a defensive coordinator. And for the most part, it's kind of what you'd expect, right? It's something that's rooted in some of those old Niners ideas and like that Seattle 3 world, but they're still playing a decent amount of 2 high coverages and trying to disguise stuff. The one thing that's notable for this game specifically, just because of the way the Vikings have played this year, obviously Minnesota is going to get a decent amount of 2 high and cloud coverages just because Justin Jefferson exists. It hasn't been at a crazy rate, but still they're going to get a decent diet of it. And what they've been able to do this year, the Vikings have been really successful at running into those 2 high looks. Every single metric you want to see is right there. The Packers have struggled so far this year in defending the run out of 2 high looks. So if they want to live that way because they're worried about Jefferson, which I'm assuming most teams are, I think that this is one of those games where Aaron Jones in this revenge moment could actually have a pretty big day.
I think this is where the Vikings really need to win the game. It is up front, and like to your point, when the defense is drained out a little bit in the box, this Vikings team has been able to run on people, and the Packers defense has not done all that well to defend the run. And I think we talked about it on maybe it was last week's show or the week before, when the Vikings, even though they haven't done that much 12 personnel running with Johnny Mundt and Josh Oliver on the field, when they do it, they have been mashing teams. And I think
Yeah.
this is the perfect game for them to really, really lean into it, especially with this linebacker group that we mentioned. Like, this linebacker unit is still not that good. And so if they're going to clear out the box even a little bit and ask those guys to really cover a lot of space and take back ground, I don't know, man. You might just start getting run over.
And then the other side of that is if they're going to play 12 personnel and the Packers are going to match it with base and you're going to put more of those linebackers on the field, can you start taking advantage of those guys in coverage? And I haven't looked at the numbers in detail, but anecdotally, going back and rewatching the Titans game, they were playing base to 12 personnel in some situations. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Vikings early in this game trot out those looks, just see what they're getting from them and kind of go from there.
And again, that's the world that Kevin O'Connell wants to live in. That's all he's trying to get you in, is that exact world.
Let's get to our next one here. Bills and Ravens. The Ravens are -2.5 at this game. I want to start with something that John Harbaugh said earlier this week. And I think it's something we probably don't do enough of on this show and just me in general and how I'm talking about and enjoying the sport. But he was talking about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and the fact that we're lucky that we get to enjoy this. Like the fact that we get to watch these two guys play against each other. And I think that we talk about that with Mahomes and Lamar and Mahomes and Josh Allen because we've seen it so many times, right? It seems like those guys play each other every single year. We haven't gotten that many Lamar Josh Allen matchups. And we have the guy who was the MVP of the league last year, is one of the most dynamic players in the league, against a guy who right now has been the most dynamic player in the league through 4 games. And so just for a moment, I want to sit in the fact that we get this quarterback matchup on Sunday, and this is one of those that we should really enjoy.
And it's not even just that Lamar is the reigning MVP and a two-time MVP, and that Josh Allen is currently on his way to being the new MVP.
I'm
Who
so
was the
sorry. I'm still
one?
sorry, by the way.
I feel so bad for like we did the entire show and we were like Chiefs this, Chiefs that, Chiefs this, Chiefs that, and at the end I was like, I mean, I think the Bills will be good, but the Chiefs are going to win 14 games. It's going to be Pat, right? And the Chiefs might still win 14 games. I don't know, but
Dude, the Chiefs
the
are
way
still undefeated, by the
they
way.
are still a great team, exactly. But like,
That the
man,
Bills
Josh
offense
has
has
been
been
incredible.
incredible. And what I feel and what we're talking about for those of you guys who don't know is on our preview show coming into the year. Derrik tried to pick Josh Allen as his MVP, and I slowly talked him out of it, not because of Josh Allen, right? Like I love Josh Allen. I'm a
It was
huge
never a
Josh
Josh
Allen
thing.
supporter. It was about looking at which sort of teams typically produce the MVP. And those teams typically are 13-win teams, the number one seed in their conference. And I just didn't know if the Bills would be able to get there defensively. And with some of the questions about the new pieces on offense, it's like, all right, well, they'll probably settle as like a 10, 11 win team that makes the playoffs. Is that enough to win the MVP award? And so you eventually went with Mahomes. And the reason I feel bad is it would be so fun to have picked Josh Allen to win the MVP and then to watch what he just did over the last 3 weeks. And then if you want to project that over the course of an entire season, and I feel deeply bad about taking that experience away from you.
I feel good enough that I at least put the floating thought out there that I'm
It's
I'm
true.
okay. I'm okay that it's out
You
there
can
enough that I'm
blame
like
me
I
if you
can
want to.
halfway right. I can halfway claim it, and that is enough for me. I'll take it.
We talked a lot about Josh Allen and the Bills offense on the midweek show we did with Mitch, but you and I really haven't dug into what's driving this. So I just want to take a minute to get your take and your thoughts on what feels different about this version of the Bills offense and by extension, this version of Josh Allen.
I mean, they've gotten to a point where I think we kind of said this coming into the year, where obviously you had a guy in Stephon Diggs the past few years, where even if the offensive design is not perfect or whatever, we can always lean on this guy. And then the second half of last year, that just actually wasn't true. And they kind of had to rework the offense a little bit. And obviously, they were working in Joe Brady as the new play caller, and things were just different. And I think we saw coming into this year, we were like, well, are they going to be okay piecing together all of these different answers instead of just having this one guy that we can lean on? And the answer is yes, because they've been a really good like under center run team when they want to. They've been really good at pulling guys and getting vertical displacement, and they've been good at that. They've been a good gun run team when they want to, because obviously when you add the element of Josh Allen to it, you can do that. They can mix and match all their personnel. Like obviously they have two useful tight ends they can go and put out there. Khalil Shakir has been a really, really good player out of the slot for them. Keon Coleman has been nice outside. Mac Hollins, he kind of gives them something as a blocker, which is, we said it coming into the year. I think you even brought him up as like, who is the, fringe player that might actually do a lot for them. And I think he has been, in just in terms of being able to block and again, get into these different personnels and do different things. So this is an offense where, like I said, we came in wondering, okay, can they just have an offense where you piece all the other stuff together and all the answers with everyone else, and then Josh Allen is what gives you the flair that puts you over the top? And the answer has been emphatically yes, and it's been really cool to watch.
Yeah, this watching him, we talked about this in the midweek show. It's just such a cool experience watching him right now within this offense for 2 reasons in my mind. The work he's doing pre-snap is just beyond anything he's done at any point in his career. How much he's controlling protections, how much he's just getting guys lined up, understanding the operation of the offense. He's very in control, and that extends to even like when he decides to scramble. and when to weaponize his athleticism. I think he's just got such a good grasp for how to unleash the player that he is right now. And seeing all of that start to click like fully, I think it's been that way for a while to an extent. Like it was closer to this last year than I think people are probably ready to acknowledge, but I do think it's become even more pronounced and more refined, and that process is very cool. And the other side of that is watching him in an offense that is really making it easy on him and the players around him. And Joe Brady comes in last year in the middle of the season. You could only do so many things in the middle of the season. You could tweak some stuff. They started running the ball more. They started using James Cook as a receiver more. But still, the train's moving. You can't really change that much. This offseason, I think that they've really done a great job of figuring out all of the different bells, whistles, levers they want to use to just give this team answers. What they're doing with motion before the snap, whether it's, all right, we're getting a man ID because we're moving this guy, or we're creating leverage, what they've been able to do with motion against man coverage specifically, they're just pushing all the right buttons right now. And when you combine that with a good offensive line that can run the ball on their own terms and a guy who right now feels like the most dynamic player in the NFL, you're getting the results that we've seen so far.
They've done a lot of cool stuff, like you just mentioned, all the motion stuff that they've done, especially in the backfield, like getting
Yeah.
guys into, what might look like split gun sets and all that other stuff. Just
The
using
orbit
that.
motion, the yo-yo
Yep.
motions, it's very cool. It's a fun offense to watch right now for more reasons than, hey, Josh Allen, go make a play, which that's how it's been a lot over the last few years.
Exactly. Like they are a put together offense, and then Josh every now and then just does some of that stuff when he has to. But I think some of that like motion stuff has really helped James Cook become like a really, really like the pass catcher everybody thought he was going to be coming into the league. I think it's helped him a lot. I think even some of the stuff they're doing with their back alignment, where there will be plays where they'll either use the running back or put somebody like kind of in the backfield, like a running back, but they'll push his alignment all the way out, like outside the tackle, and it immediately puts the linebacker in conflict because he's like, well, if I'm in my normal alignment, I'm already out leveraged to the flat. And if I push myself out there a little bit to match him, I'm going to get beat over the middle. And so you kind of, on these clear passing downs, force the linebacker into a really bad alignment. And just some of the stuff that they've been willing to do with that, I think has been really, really cool and really interesting.
The James Cook drops are to me more frustrating now because of how good he is in every other area. It would be easier to stomach that drop in the end zone. And this has been a consistent issue. Like at training camp when I was there, it was like an open joke that James Cook just couldn't hang on to the ball. That would be fine if he were just a lost cause of a player in every other area. But the fact that now he looks like one of the most explosive dynamic backs in the league, and every once in a while we're just going to have one of those back breaking drops that could potentially be a touchdown, it makes it that much more frustrating. Like I kind of just wish that he wasn't as good as he is everywhere else because it would be easier to live with those moments.
I almost, purely as an entertainment product, I almost think it's funnier when a player is clearly so good, but just has like one just ridiculous malfunction. Like for the longest time, Lamar Jackson could just not stop fumbling despite being an MVP. And it was like, dude, what are we doing? And I think James Cooks is yeah, sometimes he just has a drop that doesn't make any sense.
Do you enjoy it as much when it's Trevor Lawrence sailing 2 passes a game and often in backbreaking fashion? Is that part fun for you?
No, not particularly. But if it was almost any other player, I would find it pretty funny.
We've talked a lot about the Bills offense, and even on that midweek show, we talked a lot about the Bills offense. What I didn't talk about in that discussion and really wanted to was some of the things that are happening on the Bills defense right now. Because one of the reasons that we were relatively skeptical about the Bills' ceiling as a team is all of the question marks on that side of the ball. No Matt Milano, a lot of youth at safety, a lot of unproven players at safety that have really never gotten a lot of run. And so you have all these pieces where it's like, okay, like, and can the front take a step forward? Is there going to be a solid group? And like, are they going to be able to use as much disguise on the back end because they don't have players that have gotten that much time? And, when it's Poyer and Hyde and they can and hide certain things before the play, like, is that going to be a part of this defense? And if it's not, is it really the Bills defense? Like I had my share of questions. And I think what we've seen over the first 3 games is, even as somebody who has a lot of respect for Sean McDermott and what he's done on that side of the ball, I don't think I gave them enough of the benefit of the doubt about what this infrastructure looks like defensively and how they can still make this thing go. And even as they've cycled between guys that they're missing early in the season. We talked about no Milano, no Teron Johnson for a couple games. They lose Terrell Bernard. And the fact that they've still been able to be the defense they want to be while missing some of those guys, I don't think we've acknowledged how impressive that is, or at least acknowledged enough how impressive that is.
It's super impressive. Like, I came into the year not being that worried about the floor, right? Kind of for all the stuff that you've
Yeah.
just mentioned. It's like we give him a good benefit of the doubt that this will be fine. It will not ruin the team. The offense will be what it needs to be, and they can go still win 10 games. We probably did not give him enough credit for the fact that he can, if you give him a full offseason, even with a lot of shuffling parts, even without not really adding that much talent to the defense this offseason, that they were just going to coach it up well enough that everybody was going to get in place. And some guys are playing some of the best ball that they've played, or at least better ball than they played last year. Like Von Miller has taken taken a step again, and he looks like a really good player. AJ Epinesa has had some really, really good moments so far this season. Christian Benford is playing even better than he did before, which is
He's been
incredible.
unbelievable. He's been so good.
He's like the poster boy for what we're talking about for Sean McDermott, right? Where it's just like he just gets these guys to play a certain way. And I think you were probably more confident that Benford was going to be at that level than me coming into the season, and he's just completely blown away my expectations. He's been incredible.
This is kind of the conversation we've had about the Bills over the last couple of years, even on defense. It's like, okay, there are guys who are contributors for them that are in-house draft picks, but how many of them are like actually needle moving players? Guys that it's like, all right, that's like a star or a borderline star. And I think we've seen flashes from Rousseau, and even with a guy like Benford, it was always like, well, for a sixth round pick, he's given them a lot. And I feel like those guys have taken another step to now there's no qualification necessary. It's not like, oh, we've seen Rousseau been really dynamic for stretches, but can he put it all together? Brentford is good for where he was drafted. I don't need the caveats with those guys right now. They're just difference making players at really important positions. And I think that, along with maybe us underrating this system and how they can bring guys along, I think that's why this defense is better and feels a little bit more dangerous than we probably thought it might be coming into the season, just because we're getting better versions of the guys we thought we knew.
I think that's exactly it. And I think it is too, like, some defenses are built off of what they can do with a handful of their stars, and then everything else kind of falls in line around that. That is not really how it's ever been under Sean McDermott. It's been like this is a hive mind type of defense, and everybody is playing
Yeah.
towards one goal. Everyone is just doing their job. It's almost closer to like a Belichick defense, and that's like they're not pulling the same levers, but just in terms of like that feel of like everybody is just playing to do their job, and that's it. And everybody, you end up better than the sum of your parts.
I love the hive mind thing. I think that's a really good way to visualize it. Did you watch Rick and Morty?
Yeah.
When he's dating the hive mind and
Yes, yes.
they all have the same color face and all talk the same. That's what the Bills defense feels like right now, where it's like, all right, we're gonna yank Teron Johnson out here. We're gonna put Cam Lewis in there, but we puked the Bills defense DNA into his mouth, so he's essentially the same player now.
It's the same
And
guy.
even Dorian Williams, who, obviously he's playing for Milano, and now he's like their number one linebacker because Bernard's out. Even he's just like, okay, now I'm going to do the stuff that like Terrell Bernard would have done in terms of like the splash plays that I'm making. And the other guy that I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me with this, was Jamarcus Ingram, who's now like their dime corner because Cam Lewis has stepped into a slightly different role. There was a moment where him and Cam Lewis both came off the edge and had like a dual sack of Trevor Lawrence, where I was like, all right, now we're getting this from like the third string nickel. And I really do think the hive mind thing is a great way to comprehend how and why that stuff is happening.
Yeah, and just being able to pull from depth like that. Like I remember when the Saints defense maybe 5 years ago was really, really good when Aaron Glenn was the defensive coordinator there. I remember there was like a 2 year stretch there. They could bring anybody off the street, off the bench, didn't matter. And they would give them okay play. I'm like, how is this possible? And it just seems like, Sean McDermott has been able to do that, especially the past 2 years, but really for a long time here. I mean, we made this joke before, like 5, 6 years ago. Levi Wallace was somehow a really, really good number 2 corner only in Buffalo. And it's just been awesome.
And I think that they've done such a good job of maintaining the complexity on the back end. If you watch all of the moving pieces, they're disguising things, and they're really playing with quarterbacks' expectations before the snap just as much as they did last year, even with some younger, more inexperienced pieces. And that was one of my biggest questions, and I think they've answered it in a resounding way. So let's spin this back to this game specifically. If you're thinking about what this defense has looked like against a Baltimore offense that it's been a little uneven over the course of the year. They look great against the Dallas defense that can't stop anybody right now, but so far there have been some frustrating moments for the Ravens. What is like the most compelling part of this matchup specifically for you?
I think the Ravens just have to find a way to run the ball. I think that's the only way that they are
It's not an
going to.
exciting answer, but I think
It's
it is the
really not.
correct answer.
And it's not a unique answer, right? Like, you could say that about almost any Ravens offensive game where it's like, yeah, this is one of the best rushing teams in the NFL. Their pass catchers are a little bit iffy. You need to just get them in situations where they are able to stay ahead of the sticks, and Lamar doesn't have to feel like he's going to be in 3rd and 8 every single play. I just don't know if we're going to get all the way there because I mean, for as good as the Ravens have been rushing the ball, I think especially early on in games. Again, maybe not last week, just because the Dallas defense is so bad. But I think early on in some games they have a little bit struggled to find what they want their offensive identity to be running the ball. And I think especially like against the Raiders, it took them some time to realize that the best course of action was let's hit the perimeter with our 240-pound running back and just let him have a runway and go do that. So I would like to see them get into some of that this week and maybe run a little bit of like veer and kind of make this Bills linebacking core use their eyes a little bit, which I think has kind of been their biggest issue. Even though Dorian Williams can run, I think if you can confuse him a little bit eyes wise in the middle of the field, that would be good. So I think just running the ball again, yeah, boring answer, but that kind of has to be the way that the Ravens are going to win this game.
I think so too. And part of the reason I think we haven't necessarily seen the weaknesses of this Bills defense against the run. And like that's what it would be, right? You want to be a nickel all of the time. Your linebackers are somewhat of a question mark. You've got penetrators up front, like the Ed Olivers of the world. You don't have the stoutest defensive lineman, even if you have a lot of length on the edge. That's essentially your best asset against the run. But if teams want to line up in heavy personnel and run it at you, they probably can. And one of the reasons we haven't necessarily had to see that and the Bills dealing with that this year is they've been up by like 2 touchdowns for most of the last 2 weeks. So a game that is a little bit closer, where the game script looks a little bit different, where Baltimore could potentially lean into some of those weaknesses relatively that the Bills have on defense. I think there's a chance we see that play out in a way we just haven't over the last couple of weeks when they've absolutely boat raced the Dolphins and the Jags.
Right, and like it's funny, the only close game the Bills have really played was for a little bit. They had the Cardinals game, but that was also, both those teams were kind of going back and forth. I would expect this to be the opposite, where it's like both teams are kind of getting stops and really forcing themselves to kind of rock fight each other, which I do think this makes this one interesting. I actually did look it up though. In terms of yards before contact allowed by a defense, the Cowboys are the second worst, which is not surprising at all. They're at 2.27 yards. So they've been really, really bad. I'm honestly shocked they're not first. But you know who is third worst? It's the Buffalo Bills at 2.18. And again, some of that is that Cardinals game that they played. They kind of got run on a little bit early in that game. So I do think there maybe is a world where, again, I don't know if they're going to tackle as poorly as the Cowboys did last week on Derrick Henry. I mean, he was just throwing people off, and it looked like a Royal Rumble match. It was pretty disgusting. So I don't know if it'll be that bad, but I do think there is a world where the Ravens can do that in this game.
I think so too. And then the other stat that I looked up, the Bills are third in the NFL in explosive rush rate allowed this season. Like you can gash them every once in a
And
while.
what do these two guys do? Derrick Henry
it's
is an explosive
explosives.
guy, and Lamar is fast again. I think that's one other small thing I want to mention. Lamar is really fast again. Last year and the last couple years, he's been more of that slow, agile. His vision has been really impressive. He can burn again, man. He can really move.
It was funny last year when I was trying to say that he looked less explosive, and there were people that just thought that was silly. And I was like, I promise you, as somebody deeply invested in Lamar Jackson in fantasy football right now, I am aware of the fact that he cannot rip off that 80-yard run even when he has the grass to do so. So seeing that explosiveness get back after he's lost a little bit of weight, I'm very in tune with it because I'm in the exact same position this year.
Exactly. And it's funny. Like, yeah, I remember people doing that too when I was kind of saying the same thing too. I was like, man, he's just not as explosive, not as fast as he used to be. And they were like, he's still a really effective runner. I'm like, yeah, but I've seen him in 2017, 2018, 2019 when he was fast, and it doesn't look like that, but it kind of looks like that again.
Let's get to the other side of the ball here and talk about, what that Ravens defense might look like against this Bills offense, because obviously they're clicking on all cylinders. They're able to do whatever they want right now. The stat I wanted to throw out about Josh Allen that I didn't mention before, against man coverage this year, he's averaging 0.97 EPA per dropback.
That
So
doesn't seem possible.
on plays where he has dropped back against man coverage, they essentially score a point every single time that happens. So this year, he's added 26 total EPA against man. That's so almost 4 touchdowns worth of more than 4 touchdowns worth of points against man coverage. No one else in the league is above 18. I don't think teams should play man coverage against the Bills. I think they should probably stop doing that.
I would reckon not doing that. Yeah, it seems like giving Josh Allen the simple answers when he has now a bunch of different receivers who can separate, and the offensive line's playing well, and he's always been one of the best guys at running against man coverage. Yeah, I would probably not do a whole lot of that.
And especially because they're getting answers as to when that man coverage is happening because of all the ways that they're using motion.
Great
Like, there's a
point.
bunch of different layers to this. What have you thought about the Ravens defense through 3 games now that we're in the Zach Orr era?
I think we knew coming in that it was going to take them a little bit of time to find their identity and what they wanted to be. Like week 1 obviously they played the Chiefs. It didn't seem like they wanted to do anything. Like they really weren't sending any of their pressures that I think we were accustomed to from this defense. And obviously they weren't as aggressive under McDonald as they were Martindale, but they just weren't throwing pressures really that much at Patrick Mahomes. And then like last week they were running a ton of man coverage, which was again more of like the Martindale thing, which we weren't used to from McDonald's. So like they've
7th highest man coverage rate in a single game in the post-Wink Martindale era last week against the Cowboys.
that is insane. And like again, I guess against the Cowboys it kind of makes sense, but again, it's still they're clearly trying all these different game plans to see what they want to be with this unit, which that part I think we could have expected. What I have been a little bit disappointed by is I think the cornerback play has again been volatile, which is kind of always been the case with a guy like Marlon Humphrey. But Nate Wiggins has been a little bit volatile, even though he's had really good moments. He's also been a little bit, up and down because I mean he's a little bit of a thinner player, so that's probably going to happen.
I'm also willing to give him the benefit of the doubt against CeeDee Lamb
Right.
last week. Like
Yes.
CD cooked him several different times, and it's like I'll give you that one. If this
Right.
continues against lesser players, maybe it'll be an issue.
Right. The All Pro who just had a historic season last year. It's probably okay if he beats you a couple of times. But what has really uh, deflated me about this defense is I think the middle of their coverage has not been as good as it has been in years past. I don't think Roquan Smith is playing at the level that he's played at before. I think like the past year and a half, this defense was built off of Roquan Smith playing like an all pro coverage linebacker, like truly one of the best at squeezing space and contesting every single route. Right now, he's playing like above average. So, like, I don't think he's been bad or anything. It's just that the calculus for the defense changes when he's just fine versus playing like an all pro. And then you add that on top of the fact that they've swapped out, obviously, Patrick Queen going to Pittsburgh. And now they have Trenton Simpson playing on the other side. And he just can't handle as much of the stuff that Queen had gotten used to in this defense. So it's just the middle of their coverage and defense is lost a step a little bit, it feels like.
I think that's a great way to articulate why they feel this way right now. Because we talk about the Bills feeling like this hive mind sort of defense where it's like there's 12 or 13 players out there. The Ravens don't feel like that right now, and they did last year. The superstars don't feel like superstars. So I feel like overall the unit just has a different sort of feel than it would have when those guys were, you could feel their impact on pretty much every single play. But the other side of this is because I don't think they know exactly who they want to be. You sense the weaknesses, right? Like you pay attention to the moments where they're getting a Trenton Simpson or an Ardarius Washington or a Nate Wiggins on islands. And because it doesn't feel like this collective sort of approach that is completely aware of who it wants to be and how they want to play, I think that you see the weak points a little bit more than you would have in the past, even if the personnel isn't demonstrably worse than it's been over the last couple of years, if that makes sense. Like, I don't necessarily think Ardarius Washington's like a demonstrably worse player than what Arthur Millette was giving them. But because I don't think they've really settled into this is who we are, there's a lot of confidence, there's a lot of cohesion. You feel those weaknesses personnel wise more than you would have last season.
No, I think that's a great way to put it. And again, I just talked about this kind of with the opposite of the Bills, where it's like sometimes you have these defense where 2 or 3 stars, you're hinging everything off of them. And then, like you said, if they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, they're not 100% sure how they want to deploy those stars and how everyone else is going to fill in around them. Then, yeah, this is where it starts to look like this, where all those other pieces around them, you can, like you said, feel those moments where they're the ones that are getting picked on. Whereas last year, it felt like the Ravens were so often able to keep themselves out of those moments. And again, I'm willing to give them like another month and a half for them to figure this out. But for the case of this game, it probably will be an issue.
Yeah, because they're playing against right now what is the best offense in the
Yes.
NFL and the most dangerous quarterback in the NFL. And you could see, I think that even what they were talking about publicly in the media last week when John Harbaugh was just saying, hey, we need to be a little bit stickier in coverage. And you saw the amount of man coverage they were playing. I don't know if I love that as a solution. Like that feels like you're grasping for an answer and stepping outside of who you actually want to be. And I think that that can come with some pitfalls as you're searching for an identity.
100, absolutely. Like that is just what's going to happen. But like it's such a tough spot because I understand why Zach Orr doesn't want to just do some of the stuff that Mike McDonald was doing, especially with a couple of new players. Like, you pull out Patrick Queen and stuff like that. At the same time, like I said, I think it's going to take them a few months before he really figures out what he wants this unit to be and how he wants to call it. And so I don't really necessarily, even if I don't love that, their answer to being more sticky in coverage is like, oh, let's just play man. And by default, that has to be stickier. It's like, that's technically true, but I don't know if that fixes anything. I don't necessarily blame him for trying it.
It certainly doesn't fix anything against this Bills offense right now and what they're doing against man coverage. So just something to keep in mind if they want to try to go back to that well. Last game here, Seahawks and Lions. Lions are 3.5-point favorites. The undefeated Seahawks, they're 3-0. They look pretty darn good on both sides of the ball. I want to just take a step back before we dig into the specifics of this matchup and take your temperature on how real you think this is with Seattle and what your gauge is for what they're doing on offense and defense right now.
I think offensively, it is mostly pretty real. I think basically in terms of the offensive design, I think mostly it's still on Geno Smith as a drop back passer. Like that is still the core of what they are good at as an offense. I just think that we've added 3 or 4 plays a game, especially on some critical downs, where Ryan Grubb actually does make something easier for Geno Smith and gives him like a quick throw in the flat, or they run a rub route that gets a guy open, something like that. And they have taken away some of the random bullshit that Shane Waldron liked to do with some of just the weird 13 personnel and some of this other bizarre play calling stuff that he had. So we swapped out some easy plays, taken out some of the weird ones, and that's really been it. And then like the offense really, other than that though, hasn't been that different. Like they still can't run the ball. The guards are still really bad in pass protection. It's just that those couple of knobs being tweaked and Geno playing at a really, really, really high level as a dropback passer, that's how you get to being where they're at right now.
That's all I wanted, though. That was like
Yep.
the entirety of my optimistic case for what Geno and this offense could look like with Ryan Grubb is that stylistically, I thought it would be a lot of the same stuff. Like it'd be spread out, be a lot of stuff in the shotgun, and that's what it's been. But they've just had easier answers in certain moments when, the perfect example is man coverage, right? So last season, Geno was third from the bottom in success rate against man coverage in the NFL. I don't know how many qualified quarterbacks there were. The only guys who were worse than him were Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett in success rate against man coverage last season. Do you know who's better than him in success rate against man coverage this year?
I would
No one.
reckon Josh Allen, who
No one.
nobody really.
No one. Geno has a better success rate against man coverage this year than the man averaging 0.97 EPA per dropback. And that's all I wanted from this group. And they're the perfect example to me is they're playing against the Patriots. It's 3rd and 4. They have a bunch set to the left. JSN is lined up as the innermost number 3 receiver. He runs just like a little route to the flat with a pick. Geno hits him in the flat, 2 yards past the sticks. It's a first down. That seems so dumb and so unimportant. And in reality, those are the small differences that I just wanted to see with the Seahawks offense. If there were more layups and everything was just a little bit easier, they have the players and the quarterback to make this thing very dynamic and very dangerous. And I do think that is what it has felt like so far. The exception here, and the thing that will probably continue to hold them back, is what is happening up front. And you alluded to this. You can essentially trace every negative play that the Seahawks have had throwing the football this season to immediate interior pressure from one of the guards or the occasional loss by the third string right tackle. Like
Yes,
almost every single one.
they are actually almost built exactly like the Bucks, where I love the left tackle. The center is playing well, and the Seahawks even got an upgrade there this year. And Connor Williams, I think, has had some really nice moments. The other 3 spots have just given them so many issues that it almost hasn't mattered. Geno Smith has just gotten so good at managing pockets and so good at getting the ball out quickly and so good at throwing with confidence that he has mostly negated it, It's just that, like you said, when they do have these negative moments, right guard just loses instantly, or the left guard gets beat on a stunt, or
It's
something like that. That's it.
instantaneous most of the
Yeah.
time too. I mean, it's really bad. The losses have been really bad and really glaring and blatant. And I think even for any quarterback, no matter how well you're managing the pocket, that can be difficult to deal with. So let's transition this to what it might look like against this Lions defense, because the Lions defense, I think there's some areas that I'm really excited about and some areas that I still feel like they're not quite there. Watching this Lions defense defend the run right now is very enjoyable. Like the amount of just big physical bodies they have on the defensive line, like all the way across the board, not just at defensive tackle. Like when they got Josh Pascal or Marcus Davenport or those guys on the edge, their ability to just completely cave in any sort of perimeter run is unlike almost any team in the league because of the body types they have out there. And you mix that with a physical play from the linebackers, even as they've kind of cycled between those guys because they've been hurt. And this looks like one of the best run defenses in the league. But on a back end, it still feels like this idea of who they want to be playing all of this man coverage is just a little bit more volatile than you like, because one of the guys doing it is 3 games into his career. And even if the trajectory is good and you're excited about where he can be, Terry Arnold in game 4 probably isn't going to be that consistent of a man coverage presence.
I think that is kind of just the growing pain, like kind of like you said, that you're just going
It
to have when you have.
happens.
Yes, you have such a young player. You're asking him to play man on man coverage against a lot of the best players in the league. He was kind of a grabby player coming in. Like we knew that that was going to be one of his issues, and it has been one of his biggest issues so far. Is that he just kind of gets grabby on a lot of these routes. I think he's had some really really good moments, and then to your point, he's had some really really bad moments, and that's just going to be how it is when you play this much man coverage. And then even Carlton Davis, who has been really really good, some of his best moments have become in zone. Or when they're just running like outside routes on man coverage, where he doesn't necessarily have to play back as much to the middle of the field. So I think even then they've just kind of taken a guy who didn't run that much man coverage over when he was in Tampa, and then they've got a rookie on the other side. And it's like there probably are going to be some natural growing pains here. I've still been largely encouraged. It's just that what I think about this game is that if you're going to play this much man coverage, you're basically demanding that the quarterback across from you can just make throw after throw after throw after throw. Guess what? This is one of the few quarterbacks who I think can just make throw after throw after throw after throw.
And we just talked about it. I mean, he has shown an ability to do that specifically this year in some of the numbers against man coverage and what they've been able to do. Yeah, what's interesting to me about the Lions is they're playing all this man, right? Like they're playing more man than any team in the league on third down, but they're actually blitzing on third down at a below average rate. And I know that Aiden Hutchinson has played really well, and Davenport, when he was playing, was a nice secondary pass rusher. Well, now Davenport's out for the year, which is a huge bummer because I was actually really enjoying watching him play. I thought that both against the run and as a pass rusher, he was like a really nice presence for this team. I wonder if they're going to get to a place where they say, listen, if we're going to be playing man 60% of the time on third down, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to only be blitzing 30% of the time. And does that make things just speed up a little bit more where you're putting a little bit less stress on these corners who are kind of having to wade into this play style for the first time?
I think that's a good point. And truthfully, it's not like these linebackers are really that useful of coverage players. It kind of would make more sense to just send them. And I know like Derek Barnes is out for this game, but like he's the guy who I think has been really good at blitzing. But really, all of their guys, outside of Jack Campbell, who I know when they drafted him, they wanted him to be more of a coverage guy, and so maybe they've been just been trying to get him reps and get him comfortable there. But I think for the immediate, it would probably be better if, to your point, they just sent some guys and force those corners to add, to carry 0.25 less seconds in coverage. And then that's
Exactly.
how you get it. Yeah.
Just easing their burden a tiny bit. You can still play the way that you want to, and you can still use those guys the way that you want to, but just making it a smidge easier on them, even if you have a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. So in your mind, it's like, well, we don't need to blitz that much because we have a dominant pass rusher right now. But I think that we're learning that that's not the answer. Like having a dominant pass rush, I think actually should force you to blitz more. It should encourage you to blitz more. Like let's just create one-on-ones and be this havoc creating team rather than trying to do it halfway, that's kind of what it feels like the Lions have done so far to this point.
I think that's a great point. And like Hutchinson, I mean, he can win in any number of ways, but especially if you can line him up against a lot of these right tackles. I mean, he's faced a lot of bad ones so far, but if you can
All
for
backups.
right,
Four, four,
exactly.
four games. In week one, he faced the Rams backup right tackle. In week two, he faced the Bucks backup right tackle. In week three, who did they play last week? Oh, third string right tackle for the Cardinals last week. And now he gets the third string right tackle for the Seahawks. It's been good to be Aiden Hutchinson for the first month of the year.
It has been great to be Aiden Hutchinson. And, credit to him, he's getting all the production that you would assume a really
Yes,
good player would get against those guys.
correct.
It's just he's on a I think this will like eventually slow down when we get to week 9. We'll be like, why doesn't he have as many sacks as he did early in the season? It's like, well, he's not playing the worst player on the field every single snap now. But I mean, in this game, he might be. So
On the other side of the ball, what have you made of the Seahawks defense so far? Because they're number 2, I believe, in defensive DVOA through 3 games, but they've gotten Bo Nix in his first game, a Patriots offense that we should be deeply worried about after the way that they played last week against the Jets, and then they played against Skylar Thompson last week. So I've had a hard time extricating the results from the Seahawks defense and what the Seahawks defense is actually going to look like against better competition over the course of the year.
yeah, so I won't say it's fake because I think even if you're playing against a lot of bad offenses, it's really, really hard to be the second best defense in the league. And I think there are some stuff that is really encouraging. I think they're playing with a different energy than we got out of them last year. Like this defense just doesn't feel as stale as I think it had the past couple of years under Pete Carroll. And then I think you've got a couple of players who are playing some of their best ball that they've ever played right now. Like Boye Mafe has really taken another
He's looked
step.
awesome.
Derek Hall's been a cool player. Tariq Woolen, I think, has like kind of bounced back to being the player I think they thought that he could be. So they're getting something out of these linebackers that obviously they shuffled out their entire room there. So like they are doing a pretty decent job against the teams that they played against. It's just this is the first time we're going to see them play against a real deal offense, and I'm until I see it, just not entirely sure like how I feel about what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I think they've checked every box you want them to at this point. I'm
Yeah.
still a little bit worried about the linebackers in coverage. Like that's probably my number one thing is there's a lot of air in there with all of the zone coverage that they play. And I think the teams have done a decent job of manipulating those linebackers. Like the 2 or 3 explosive completions that the Dolphins had where they're just bleeding out the middle of the field. And I think that's what we will continue to see. And the Lions obviously will be no different. But other than that, I think the front has been really good. And this is like without Nuosu. Like when they get their full stable of guys back, I think has a chance to be like one of the deepest edge rooms in the entire league with Draymond Jones, Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, Nuosu. We know what they are in the interior, even with Byron Murphy banged up. I'm with you. I think that Tariq Woolen has really bounced back. We have talked a lot about Devin Witherspoon. And then you have a coach who obviously is going to be pulling the right levers. So I think that, again, they've looked as good as you want them to look so far, but this is going to be a different sort of test in what they're dealing with the Lions offense right now that I think the points haven't necessarily been there, but down to down, this is still a very potent unit for Detroit.
Yeah, I'm still pretty bought in with Detroit. And we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Where it's like teams that are maybe not undefeated that you still feel really good about. And I still feel pretty good about Detroit. And, we talked about it a little bit. They definitely are having some growing pains with trying to get where they want to be with Jamison Williams and like shuffling in, not having as much size on the offense. Like, I think even without Josh Reynolds in the lineup, you almost feel Sam Laporta being a bad blocker even more because they just have one less guy on the field who is really good at it. Just little stuff like that. But in general, I think they've been a pretty good offense. And then by, week 8, week 9, they're going to be exactly where we want them to be.
I really liked the formula last week where it was just like, we're just going to run the shit out of the ball because right now we are still the most effective running team in the NFL, leaning on that. And I think that over the first couple of weeks, they were really enamored with this idea of pushing the ball to Jamison Williams, like feeding him. When in actuality, I think all he needs to be, maybe slightly more than this, but just make him like a supercharged version of what Khalif Raymond has been for you the last couple of years, where he's taking the top off of it. And if you want to throw the alert to him because you think it's there, by all means, go ahead. If you want to sprinkle in a couple more big crossers to him, because that just, again, creates a little bit more space for everything else, by all means, go ahead. But it wasn't broke before when you were living in their intermediate area with Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So last week when we're seeing like Laporta at number 1 and them using him on like the short post where they're tying down the linebacker to that side, or just those kind of 2-man games between those 2 players in the intermediate areas of the field, that's the Lions offense to me. Like, nobody asked you to be anything different than this. If you want to try some new stuff and sprinkle it in, that's totally fine. And I think that in the second half of last week, they had some frustrating moments. Like, Goff throws another pick to a dropping defensive lineman, which, Dennis Gardeck, we could have the Dennis Gardeck conversation later. The Cardinals defense is a lost cause, but I love watching Dennis Gardeck play football. And then, they've had some like frustrating moments, over the first couple weeks. But I think that overall, I still have a lot of faith in the foundation of this offense and what they look like when they're leaning into the things they do well,
Yeah, and the offensive line, I know Frank Ragnow is not going to play this week, which
which is a
is going
huge
to
deal.
it does hurt them, but I still think the offensive line otherwise has been exactly as advertised, at least in the run game. Again, I know I mentioned last week they, pass blocking wise had a little bit of ups and downs, but run blocking wise they have been exactly the unit that they paid for and the exact unit that they wanted. So I think that should absolutely be the formula in this game. And in most games again, because like that is the team that they built, and we don't need them to be anything different from what they are. Like there was maybe this super special world where Jameson Williams becomes like what Brandon Cooks maybe was for the Rams, like in 2017, 2018. I think it seems pretty apparent that that's not going to happen, and that's not the world we're going to end up living in. So yeah, the Lions should probably just go back to mostly what they know and sprinkle in some of this other fun stuff.
I will say that we're talking about the specific elements of the Seahawks offense or defense against this Lions offense. When the Lions have had trouble this year, it has mostly been against like simulated pressures and creepers where somebody is coming from depth, but they're still getting seven guys into coverage. Goff has thrown a couple picks that way. There's been some pressures and sacks that way. The Seahawks will do that. They're not a big blitz team, but they're up in like the top 7 or 8 and dropping guys off of the line of scrimmage and just playing like a sound zone defense behind it. So just something to keep in mind. Like if there's a tipped ball because Mafe is dropping into coverage and Goff doesn't see him and that ball gets picked off. Like that's the type of thing we might see again this week, just based on where the Lions have struggled and some of the stuff the Seahawks have liked to do so far.
And that's a great point because Goff has kind of always been like a very good, if you point him in the right direction, he can make the throw. And I think this year against the blitz, he's actually done a really, really good job of that, especially against some of these too high pressures that I've been bringing up. He's actually been one of the better quarterbacks at answering those and being willing to make those throws in those underneath windows.
He's been
It's
one of the
just
most
that, like,
effective quarterbacks in the league against the blitz this year.
he's been awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just like you said, on those moments where he thinks he's getting blitzed and he thinks he can go fit that window that's going to be there, that void, and they drop a Dennis Gardeck into the window. That's where you can get Jared Goff.
All right, let's get to this week's sports screen. This is from Sean Mers. He says, 2 teams coming off slow, heartbreaking losses, a staggering injury report, and 2 paper-thin offensive lines. The glimmers of hope from a hot start on one side and a great offseason on the other are beginning to tarnish. But if you ask the fans, this is the only one that matters. The Saints and Falcons rivalry is tied all time at 55-55, and this bad football game will crown a new king of mediocre mountain. This is Saints Falcons as it was always meant to be. No championship aspirations, no long-term plan for contention, locked in eternal petty conflict. Who dat, Sean Mers. Really like that a lot because it really does feel like even if we've cooled on the Saints a little bit after the 2-0 start, after what they look like last week on offense against the Eagles, and we still have our questions about the Falcons, this does feel like a very important game potentially for establishing the inside track in the NFC South, but it's still hard to get overly excited about what the game means in the big picture.
That's the thing. I'm stuck on mediocre mountain, which I think is the perfect way to
So great.
describe the NFC South since the Tom Brady Super Bowl year. Because there was even the year after that where Tom Brady and those Bucks not a good team. Obviously, last year's Bucks team barely scraped into it, and this year the NFC South still looks.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to encapsulate it because I think he captured the feelings that everybody has going into that game. We wanted to take some time on a few of these preview shows just to like sit with a quarterback and our impressions of that guy through however many games this season. And I wanted to take some time today just to chat about Jayden Daniels. We were already going to do this before the game he had on Monday night. So me and Mitch spent a lot of time talking about him on the midweek show, just responding to that Monday night game. But you have not had a chance to kind of dig into what you've seen from Daniels and what your impressions have been. So after that game and just taking into account what the first 2 weeks look like, where are you at with Jayden Daniels 3 games into the year?
I think my biggest takeaway right now with Jayden Daniels is that there are a lot of times when quarterbacks come into the league and it takes a really long time to get confirmation on the things they are good at. Like I think for any young quarterback, it's going to take a while for them to sort out the questions they have or to fully develop as a player, all that stuff. But sometimes you just get guys who come in and they're just not even ever good at the thing that they were supposed to be good at, whether it's like Bryce Young last year or Zach Wilson. He was supposed to be this creator and super accurate, and he just never was that in the NFL. I think that has not obviously been the case with Jayden Daniels. I think there were a handful of things that we thought Jayden Daniels would be good at coming in, and he has been good at. Obviously, one is the rushing and the scrambling. He's been incredible. He has been, I swear, there's been 5 different plays where most quarterbacks would have been stopped a yard or two short of the sticks, and he somehow just has that extra little juice to wiggle through and get the first down. And I think it's been super valuable.
What he's
And
done
so
with
I
his legs, especially when pressured, has been really
yes.
impressive and just important to the overall success of this offense.
Right. And so I think whether Jayden Daniels looked good or bad overall, we were probably going to get that. I think what's been really nice to see is that his general ability to play on time, to get the ball out, to throw accurately to all 3 levels has been really impressive. And that's, what I thought coming out of college, his best throws were throwing curls, throwing like rhythm throws into the flat, throwing obviously those rhythm go balls, just balls where he's 1, 2, 3 balls out, boom, and it's there. His timing, his accuracy, the quickness of how the ball just comes out of his hand is really, really impressive. And so I think that's been good. I think we've seen like a very small level of growth from him in terms of pocket movement and keeping his eyes up down the field later in the play. Granted, I think he's largely been untested in that realm, but I think we've seen these moments where it's like, okay, you have 1 or 2 plays a game where you're keeping your eyes up, you shuffle a little bit and you go make a throw. And so I think that's been good. And so that's been my impression of Daniels, is that we've gotten to see the good that we thought we were going to get coming out of college. And that's a really good like baseline to work with, a good floor to have as a player.
I just love the pace that he's playing with. He's very assertive in the decisions that he's making. And I think part of the reason he's been able to do that is I think that the way that Washington has structured their offense over the first 3 weeks, even if there are some people who are a little bit frustrated about all of the screens and all of the underneath stuff, and there's been a ton of that, right? Like I think 36% of his attempts have been behind the line of scrimmage this year. It was the second most in the NFL. But I think that was, if not purposeful, then there was something behind it where it's like, okay, let's bring him along slowly. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. And I think they've slowly started to expand it. And so even when they've tried to move beyond that a little bit, I think that they've just done a really good job of like, okay, we're running a slant flat to that side. Okay. The perfect example for me is the game against Washington or the game against Cincinnati. They have Austin Eckler like do that shuffle motion to the right. He releases into the flat, and then they have a little short post coming behind it with Noah Brown. He makes that decision, Daniels does, immediately. Like he sees that guy go to the flat, he's throwing that short post. It's on time, it's beautiful. I think they've done a great job with the horizontal stretch they've created within the offense that's given him a lot of space to make some of these in-breaking throws. There's another good example. I can't remember if it was against the Giants or the Bengals, but they sent Noah Brown in motion, like a jet motion to the right. He ends up being the number one receiver to the outside, and then he runs a slant immediately. And because he's isolated to that side, there's an ocean of space for Daniels to throw the ball into. And I think that they've just really done a good job of feeding the offense to him and asking him to make not simple decisions, but fairly easy decisions, but he's been incredibly decisive in how he's made them. So I think that part's been really encouraging. And then the other part about just him being like decisive, his willingness to stand in the pocket and deliver throws under pressure. That's what's been to me like super impressive. Obviously, the touchdown to McLaurin in the Cincinnati game stands out, but even outside of that, there have been some throws. There was a corner route to Zach Ertz in the Giants game where he just stands in with the guy bearing down on him and delivers the ball and does not flinch in the pocket. And my question with him in pressure was always going to be, how is he going to make second reaction throws? Is he going to be able to move in the pocket and continue to keep his eyes downfield and not just take off? That I don't think we've quite gotten an answer to yet. But if your answers against pressure are, I'm going to scramble for 8 yards and it's going to be a first down, or I'm going to unflinchingly throw this ball while getting the shit kicked out of me, that might be enough, even if he's not making second reaction throws after having to maneuver around the pocket.
Right. And the way I actually want to frame this is that second quality that you just mentioned. Kirk Cousins actually really has this quality where it's like, is he always the best guy at moving around in the pocket and quick making a second decision and going and doing all that stuff? Not necessarily. But if Kirk knows he wants to throw this dig route, and there's a free runner, he's going to throw the damn digger out and it's going to get there. Jayden Daniels kind of does have that quality to him. It's to me where it's like later in the down, he has to move around in the pocket and keep his eyes up. That's where I get some questions. But if he can be a good enough runner where you just don't have to do that, then it can be fine. Like you said, like you have enough answers, especially for a first year player, that you're probably going to be okay. And then we can hope that by year 2, year 3, this is something he works on.
Absolutely, and think about Lamar's development in that area.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good person to point to. Early in his career, Lamar was just gone. He wasn't hanging in the pocket and trying to make plays late in the down from the pocket. Last year, we saw him start doing that, and I think it opened up a different version of him as a player, but that's 4 years into his career. I mean, this is a guy who's using what is at his disposal, and it is making him a very dangerous player. The thing that stuck out to me when I was talking to people at training camp this year about him is they were just harping on how advanced of a processor he was and how quickly he sees the game. And I think for the most part, you've been able to see flashes of that. We talk about how well he's reading those. Just like you read this player. If X, then you do Y. If Y, then you do X. He's done a very good job of that. And then the other part is there are moments where you'll see him actually read something out like across the entire field. There was a completion he had to Luke McCaffrey in the second half of the Washington or the Bengals game where he's starting to his right. He gets all the way back to McCaffrey on his left, and he finds an in rhythm completion first down. And the part of that play that I think really stuck out to me beyond his play on that concept, Zacchaeus chips the defensive end and then releases into the flat. And as he's releasing into the flat, that's when Daniels' eyes are getting back there. And that's when the defender steps up. It's just good ball. Like that's what Washington's offense feels like right now. And I think that there was a lot of skepticism about what Cliff would be and what this offense would be. And I think for the most part, they have done a great job of catering it to a young quarterback and asking him to do the things that he is best at.
That's the best way to put it. And it's again, it's not that every decision is super simple necessarily. It's that it's streamlined in a way that is very easy. Like they are not asking him to be Matthew Stafford or Dak Prescott or Andrew Luck. Like they're not,
And they
and they shouldn't,
shouldn't.
right? Yes, yeah, exactly. That is the important point. Is that they shouldn't, especially for a rookie quarterback. And just the way that Jayden Daniels plays, like that is just never the type of player that he looked like coming out of college. Like it seemed like the best version of what you were going to get out of Jayden Daniels in terms of the way that the offense was designed was a lot like what the Eagles were doing with Shane Steichen and Jalen Hurts, where it was a lot of RPOs, a lot of vertical shots outside the numbers, a lot of quick game. It's just that I think kind of early on, you're already seeing that Daniels can kind of do that a little bit faster. And I
Yes.
think that is why it is looking as good as it is immediately.
I want to be clear about this. When I say that they're asking him to like read one guy and make a decision, that is not a derogatory comment. That's what they ask Brock Purdy to do. That's what they're asking Sam Darnold to do. That's what good offenses in the NFL in 2024 are asking their quarterbacks to do. I just didn't know that Washington would be that sort of offense that
Right.
was giving those sorts of answers to their quarterback early on. So there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, there are some of the answers they've had against pressure just by design. Like there was a 3rd and 16 screen to Eckler in the Giants game that was perfectly called. They had an answer against zero where they had like a little wrap route to Zach Ertz that was really well done. They've had a couple screens in the right moments to the perimeter. They had a fake bubble wrap route to Zach Ertz that went for a chunk gain. Like it all feels like very cohesive and well timed right now. And I think that when you have a quarterback who's dynamic with his legs, who's making really good decisions, who's clearly a good processor and throws the ball accurately, and you're putting him in the right situations, that's what you're seeing right now. And if I were a Washington fan, it's really, really exciting. I don't know what the ceiling looks like, but based on the decision making right now, I would bet a lot of money that he is going to be a capable, like reliable NFL quarterback for a while.
That is the perfect framing, is that you should already feel good that he is going to be in a functional spot, because most rookies just don't like look this good early on. Like it's just not a thing that happens. And I think the fact that you are immediately getting that, even if we have some questions still to be
He's
answered, which
played a
I
lot of
do,
football. He's going to be
right?
24 in like a month.
Exactly. He should already look a little bit good. I do think that's something to keep in mind, by the way, is that some of these younger quarterbacks are probably not going to look as good because, yeah, they just don't have as many reps. But the fact that Daniels, what do we say about these old quarterbacks? Though it's like, oh well, he should be pro ready if he's this old. Okay, well, I mean, Daniels does look pro ready, and he looks like he's ready to go. And so, I still don't know what the ceiling is. I think, like I kind of mentioned at the top, I think we've gotten confirmation of a lot of the things that he's good at. I still think there are a lot of questions about the things that I had coming into the, in when he came into the NFL. It's just that he's largely been untested by them. And also maybe he's just so good at the things that he is good at that it doesn't matter as much as I thought it might coming in.
Yeah, and I also just think that when you watched him at LSU, this is always gonna be one of the shortcomings of, like, evaluating quarterback prospects when you're in our position. Like, I'm watching what he's doing, and he's, like, throwing a lot of slot fades. He's not having to make, like, full field reads where he's progressing from, like, 1 to number 4 because for the most part, number 1 was Malik Neighbors, and that was enough. So without actually getting a sense of like, well, how would you read this out? How would you do this? There's really no way to know what he's going to be as a processor until you start spending time around him and start digging into what that process actually looks like. And I think that's what a lot of people are really excited about with him in the evaluation process and in the lead up to the draft. But there's just no way to get a firm grasp on that if you're not is a part of those conversations.
And that's actually a great point too. And this even just comes back to kind of maybe I'm the problem in this sense is that I think Jayden Daniels clearly does process the game really well in certain areas. I think what he does pre snap is really good. I think his timing in terms of going 1 to 2 to 3 and getting the ball out is really good. I think he is generally a good decision maker who doesn't put the ball in harm's way, and I think that is generally a good thing to have, especially when you have these other explosive parts of your game like being a good runner. It's just like where I keep getting hung up on him is just that it's some of the throws that he doesn't make that I want to see that would really make me believe more in his ceiling. Like, I still don't think he throws contested windows over the middle of the field that much. And I think his blitz replacement has still been a big question mark, even though he's
You're
had one
being
or two good
so
moments.
nitpicky though.
No,
Like
it's not nitpicky. It's like this is just the particular type of quarterback I like to watch and the thing that I value the most. And it's just that the things that he happens to be the worst at right now, again, maybe he can get better, are those things, even if he's
blitz
really good at other
replacement,
stuff.
I could say fine. You can make a value judgment on that because there have been some moments where they've failed to do that, like within the rhythm of the play, right? Like a lot of their blitz answers
Mhm.
have been him as a scrambler or they dialed up the right call. It's not necessarily
Yeah,
him
and
reading
he's
it out
he's
post snap.
turned down some good options too, is my other thing.
That is still that's a lot to ask from a guy in his third start. The fact that he's not responding to the blitz and finding answers in real time the way that you want to. That I think is a little nitpicky. The middle of the field stuff, he hasn't had to do it. Like for the most part,
But
they're not asking
that's
him
my
to do those sorts
problem.
of throws. So
But
that's the
that's my
question.
question.
Are
That
they
is
not
my
asking
question,
him to do it
yes.
because he can't do it? Or are they not asking him to do it because up to this point, they haven't had to? And I think until I get a firmer answer on that, I'm not going to knock him for not trying to access the middle of the field.
I think that's perfectly fine. I think he has turned down some throws over the middle of the field that were there. I also do think that, like, maybe like, you can still get really good offense without necessarily throwing that area of the field. Like, the Bengals haven't really done it for a long time, the Eagles didn't really do it. Like, you can still be a good offense without doing it. It's just, again, I really like to see it. I will say, he had one really, really good dig route throw to Terry McLaurin, I think, against the Giants. Like, that exact throw is the one I want to see a little bit more. That, a couple of more seam balls, then I would start to feel really comfortable. And again, if he doesn't even get there, I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. I'm just saying that's the thing that would move me from like, he's quarterback 17 or whatever, up closer to the top 10 by the end of his rookie year or whatever.
Yeah, and again, I think that some people are gonna be like, "Oh, well, he threw this route, he threw this route." Look at the space they're creating on some of those in breaking routes
Yeah.
that he's throwing. He's not throwing the ball into traffic that often. And again, I'm not as quick to ding him on that right now, just because I feel like what they're asking him to do is they're not asking him to do a lot of that because they've had so much success elsewhere. That's what
Uh,
I would say. The last point about this, the Bengals defense is terrible.
yes.
The Bengals defense is terrible,
It's
and
a
the
great
Bengals
point.
pass rush is terrible. And that is worth mentioning one final time before we put a bow on this.
Right. I will say quickly too, I'm not necessarily dinging him for not throwing the middle of the field. It's just that if I came in thinking that that was the biggest part of his game I was questioning, and I haven't seen him do it, it's just still a question mark. That's all. That's all.
Yeah, and people are gonna be like, "Well, what about what the Bengals did to the Chiefs?" Trey Hendrickson, the Chiefs'
Yes,
starting left
ruined that
tackle
game.
is no longer playing because of what Trey Hendrickson did to him. Trey Hendrickson was banged up coming into that Washington game. Brandon Coleman actually had some really nice moments in pass protection in that game. But for the most part, every other member of the Bengals defensive line is mostly useless, and they were missing their two starting defensive tackles. So just just a little bit of context as we consider that performance. But overall, I think what he did is incredibly exciting. I'm really looking forward to where he takes it because there are elements of his game that are as sharp and as honed as really any young quarterback we've seen play in a while. Like, I don't think that he's shown sort of the creativity and ability as a thrower somebody like Stroud has, who I think is like the natural in a lot of ways. But I think how decisively and authoritatively he's making decisions, it does remind me of some of the flashes we got from Stroud last year, where you could just tell immediately that it wasn't too big for him.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. That this immediately does not feel like the NFL is too fast or too big, and that's huge.
Couple things I wanted to chat about here that I want to be able to do this every once in a while where we don't want to dig super far into a game, but there's an element of it where it's like, this might only be interesting to me, but I do want to mention it. The one that I had this week was I'm just excited to watch this Broncos front play against the Jets offensive line and this Jets offense, because the Broncos right now are playing a style of defense that's not as convoluted as what the Vikings are doing, but it's as unhinged. Like, they're blitzing on like 60% of opponent dropbacks right now. And because of the body types they have up front, they've got all these bendy, explosive edge rushers. Zach Allen's playing really good football. DJ Jones is still an ass kicker. That matchup, and again, based on some of the guys the Jets offensive line has and what the Jets offense looked like last week, it's more intriguing to me than I might have thought it was going to be 2 weeks ago. And I'm actually really looking forward to watching it.
Dread it, run from it. This is always what Vance Joseph's defense becomes. He gets bored of all the other shit so fast. It always turns into let's blitz 55% of the time. Let's just throw all the fast guys at the opposing offense and let's
And
go
just
get
play
it.
a
And you
bunch
know
of
what?
man behind it.
Yes, and you know what? That's what we said coming into the season. We were like, are they going to try to do some of this other stuff, or are they just going to take all their fast guys up front? They're all pro corner. They're seemingly really promising number 2 corner in Riley Moss, and just play man coverage and throw 5-6 bodies at the problem. It turns out that's all Vance Joseph wants to do anyway, and they fully leaned into it, and they've been one of the best defenses in football, which I thought they could be like nice playing this way. I did not think 3 weeks into the season they would be as effective as they are.
Yeah, it's fun. And with the reason that they tried to spin it in Arizona as to why they're playing all that man and blitzing all that much is that, oh, well, we had all these inexperienced corners and we didn't really want them to play a bunch of complicated zone coverages. So it's like, you got this guy and we're just going to blitz in front of it. Well, now their reasoning is probably we have Patrick Surtain and now we have all these pass rushers. So they're just trying to rationalize it in different ways, whatever the players look like, in order to get to this final end result. And I also think part of it is he coached under Wade Phillips, right? Like, that's kind of how he came up in the league. I think that he's just searching for the 2015 Broncos formula wherever he goes. Even if it's not necessarily the way his defense is set up, I think that's what he's seeking.
I think it's such a great bit. Just start with the other stuff and then get to your stuff and find whatever rationalization you need to justify, like, yeah, this is actually why we're playing this way. It's because it's really good, or it's actually, our players aren't good enough, so we're just gonna make it simple. Whatever you say, man. Just we believe you. Just go play to your heart.
You had one more here. What is the thing that might only interest you this week?
I'm interested in Jalen Hurts versus his boogeyman again, Todd Bowles, man. I mean, it seems like every time these two go head to head, Jalen Hurts he just doesn't look like the quarterback I think he's supposed to be, and Todd Bowles does a really good job of getting in his head. And I think the Bucs defense has been kind of up and down this year. Obviously, they had a pretty interesting game against the Lions, but then last week you just let Bo Nix do whatever he wants to do, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And so I would like to see Bowles kind of get after Hurts again and just throw a lot of zero at him, because I don't think the Eagles' answers versus the blitz this year have been that good. And now you're missing Devonta Smith and probably AJ Brown. Like, I think they're probably both going to miss this game. And their answer to the blitz for most of the year has been, I'll throw my one-on-one to one of these really good players. Okay, well, that's just not going to be on the table. You're going to have to actually read this out. And so I'm just very interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good test because we talked about this. It's like, what are their actual answers to pressure? Are they more advanced than they were last year? And I think we've gotten some flashes of the fact that they might be, but this is going to be the ultimate test. And I don't think it's an accident that Bowles has consistently given him problems over the last couple of years.
You know what, though? If the Bucs could not tackle Bo Nix, and if Jalen Hurts continues to look as spry as he has maybe the last week or so, Maybe that's his answer, man. It's just take off, and these Bucks linebackers aren't going to tackle you. I don't know.
We're actually going to skip airing of grievances and a couple other things this week because we wanted to spend some time to talk about the front office survey that the Athletic did this week earlier on. Polled 40 people in the NFL, 35 high ranking execs and 5 coaches, and just about who they thought was the best front office in the league. I'm going to read you the results just really quickly. The Ravens were 1, Chiefs were 2, Niners 3, Eagles 4, Lions 5, Packers 6, Seahawks 7, Rams 8, Bills 9, Steelers 10. Anything surprising about that list to you?
Not necessarily surprising. I think the Chiefs are probably a little bit high, and I think they've just been allowed to get away with some stuff because they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the Patriots got away with things for a very long time because they had Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, but I think offensively it's been a little bit iffy in terms of how they've put some things together.
Why are you down relatively on the Chiefs compared to what some of these people see it? Like, what do you think that they've been allowed to get away with? What are the major missteps in your mind?
I just think everything they've done basically outside of the interior offensive line over the past 2 years has been just not the way to handle it. I think signing Juwan Taylor the way they did was kind of it didn't really work out. What they've done at left tackle the past couple of years. And obviously this year they went and tried to sign go out and get a rookie, but when you have the best quarterback ever, I would like you to go do a little bit more at the left tackle position a little bit earlier, a little bit more stronger resources. And then I think just somewhat what they've done at receiver has just been silly, especially this offseason. Like they go and sign basically 2 of the same ish type of player in Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. And I know Hollywood Brown hasn't been able to play, but like Xavier Worthy is like, it just feels like, and again, maybe this is Andy Reid, not necessarily the front office, but just Andy Reid chasing a particular type of player, both in free agency and the draft. And so I would have just liked them to get more guys who do a little bit more to, put some meat and potatoes into the offense as opposed to just getting all these flashy fun toys.
Yeah, I can understand that. I still think the Rashee Rice pick is phenomenal in what he's given them
Yeah.
so far. I mean, to get that guy at 55 and to have him be somebody that you can really build your passing offense through, even though it's been a little bit frustrating at this point, I still think that's pretty good. I don't mind what they've done along the offensive line. I think that the interior and getting Creed and Trey Smith in that single draft, the Taylor thing was probably an overpay, but I think that they're in their minds they were getting a guy who is the sort of quality tackle that doesn't usually hit free agency. And I think last year he had his issues, but I think this year he's actually been playing okay compared to what we saw from him last year. And I think that's overshadowed by what they've done defensively. Like the fact that they've been able to restock the cupboard the way they have on that side of the ball, where you can go get a McDuffie and you can like how they've built the linebacker room and going and getting a Justin Reed in free agency. And like the fact that they always seem to have like 3 or 4 capable DBs that they find after the 4th round. I do think for the most part, they've made the right series of bets, even if we probably see it in a little bit of a rosier light because they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes.
The defense, I might just be like giving 100% of the credit to Steve Spagnuolo, which is maybe not correct, but I think that's what's going on in my brain.
I also think that there are just teams below them that I would put higher, right? Like I would just put the Lions higher than 5 probably. I would
Hmm.
put the Packers higher than 6. Like I think objectively what the Lions and the Packers have done without a Patrick Mahomes at the center of all of this is just as impressive as what the Chiefs have done. I mean, the Packers' ability to kind of refresh this thing on the fly and all of the cheap contributors that they've found, like the fact that Tucker Kraft is now like a beautiful piece of this Packers offense. All the receiving parts fit together. Like, that to me, I don't think we've talked enough about what Brian Kuntz has done and kind of piecing that all back together. And then the Lions, it's like the Lions have done an insane job of adding talent to this roster. And even the smaller moves that they make, like it makes sense. Like what Marcus Davenport was giving them over the first 3 games and like how well he fit the way that they wanted to play, even if he got hurt. It just feels like all of the bets that they make, both big and small, align with who they want to be as an organization. And I think that that goes a long way. And so that's probably what I would say is that there's a couple teams here that I probably think have done a little bit better of a job than somebody like the Chiefs and somebody like the Niners, where we might be overrating the results here over what the process actually looked like.
And the Packers have been kind of cool too, because this was a team that traditionally did not go out and get a lot of free agents. But I think more recently they've been willing to do that. You go get a Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, and that just adds on to the foundation they've had forever in terms of having these really good homegrown guys.
All right, we ran a little bit long today, so we're gonna fast forward to what we want to know by the end of this weekend. Derrik, why don't you kick us off? What do you want to know by the end of week 4?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about, Todd Bowles versus Jalen Hurts. I think on the other side of the ball, we might have a chance for Quinyon Mitchell to jump ahead of the defensive rookie of the year, and be our number one, leading candidate so far. I think he's had a really strong season so far. Now you've got to go play against Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jalen McMillan has been really good. Like, this is a game where your mettle is really going to be tested. I think he can do it. I just think it's like a matter of, are we getting a 7 out of 10 performance or a 9 out of 10, that sort of thing.
Mine, we talked about this a little bit after the game they played against the Chargers last week, but by the end of Steelers Colts, I just want to know which direction I should be stepping in with the 2024 Steelers, right? Like, I don't think this is going to be the most important game they play. I don't even know if we're going to get a definitive answer on what sort of team the Steelers are on, or the Steelers are. I just want to know where I should start, which direction I should step in, and like how optimistic and excited I should be about this team. Like, if they dismantle the Colts and their Justin Fields continues to look good and the defense still looks great and they're 4-0, I think I can take a pretty solid step in the direction of this is a real team that is going to be around and is going to be competitive to the end. If they look a little bit underwhelming this weekend, maybe I'm not as excited about taking that step.
Where are you right now on the scale? Like 55-45 positive, like
I'm standing.
50-50,
My feet
dead
are
50-50?
even. My
Okay.
feet are dead even right now. I just don't know. Like, I know the defense is really scary. I know the defense is playing really well, but we've seen that in the past with the Steelers team. So it's just sort of all the other elements: how good we feel about the quarterback, how good we feel about the offense, and I'm not cutting myself off to that possibility. I just want to know how I should be feeling by the end of this weekend.
That's a good way to frame it. I think we know this, when Tomlin's the coach, you're going to get to 8 or 9 wins no matter what. It's a matter of, do I feel like you can actually get to 11? That's
Yes.
really the question.
Yes, exactly. All right, guys, that is all we've got for today. Sincerely appreciate you sticking around with us. We will be back on Sunday night for our week 4 recap. Until then, appreciate you guys listening. We'll talk to you soon.